Estate Agency X, the UK's #1 estate agency podcast discussing the future of estate agency, entrepreneurship and business with hosts Mark Burgess and Rob Brady. On this episode of Estate Agency X, I've got Mark and Ash from Nicholsons Estate Agency. Mark is the business owner of Nicholsons. He's been running it for the last 5 years. So we talk about the stages that he's gone through. Bearing in mind he set this business up just before COVID, and what he's learned in those last 5 years, and also bringing Ash onto it. Ash is an employee of Nicholsons, and what he's learned in the last year in working for an independent compared to working in a corporate, and all the technology involved, the people, the processes. So I hope you enjoy this episode. So welcome to the show, guys. For any listeners or people watching out there, just to give a bit of background on who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Mark Nicholson. From Nicholsons Estate Agents. We're a small independent agency based in North Nottinghamshire. So we cover a district called Bassett Law. One branch covering 2 towns. We've got a team of 8 people. Yeah, that pretty much sums that up.
And how long has that been for?
So we started just before Christmas in 2019. So this year it'll be 5 years.
Wow.
And it was a bit of an unusual time to start, really, because it seemed like a really good idea. And then shortly after, we heard about COVID and had the lockdown. And then it felt like a really bad idea. But we're still here, which is the main thing. We came out of it all right and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, perfect. Nash?
Yeah, so I'm Ash. I work with Mark at Nicholsons Estate Agents. I've come from a corporate background into a more independent background, or independent start now. So, but yeah, enjoying it.
And how long have you been at Mark's business for?
Just over a year now, I think.
Just over a year. Perfect.
Yeah. 18 months.
18 months now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they say stats of, businesses survival rates in a 5-year period. I mean, your statistics are probably a bit different, especially when setting up a business just before COVID. I mean, I'm sure there's different survival rates for that, like the last 5 years compared to the average statistic out there. What led you to starting your own agency in that 2019 period?
So I started in independent estate agency, and my first job in estate agency was I managed to blag my way into being a sales manager and valuer without any prior experience.
And how do you mean by blag?
Well, when I started I was originally in the motor trade, and a friend of mine who was in the motor trade ended up getting into estate agency. In fact, he started a property auction company with a guy who had some more experience in property auctioneering. And he sort of said, "Oh, this is, compared to cars, Mark, this is easy. It's a dream. They don't come back with problems. You don't have any warranty claims. Once you've sold them, you've sold them." So what ended up happening is I ended up going and speaking to them, and I got a job door knocking. And we're going back to like 2013 now, when the market was, in quite a terrible place. It was right in the doldrums. And my job was to go and knock on people's doors to convince them that auction was the way forward. So I'll just add to that. People that had been on the market for more than 3 to 6 months, I'd go and knock on the door and talk to them about auctioning the property. And actually, it was a really effective way to sell houses back then when the market was very quiet. And what happened was, over about a period of 6 months, we were quite good at winning instructions from high street estate agents. And the guy who owned the biggest high street estate agent in the town that we're in, basically got a message from him to give him a call. And he was fed up of me going and knocking on doors, pinching his clients. And he said, "The only way that I'm going to deal with you is to give you a job." Yeah. So the next thing I know, I had an interview with him, and then I was his sales manager and valuer. First valuation I went out on, I'd never been on one before. Someone had given me a little bit of pointers on comparables and what to do, but I got the instruction, and it went from there, really.
Was it you can't beat them, buy them? Is that what they basically, you've had to get brought into the business to... Cause that's a good move from them, though. If you're thinking you're getting, losing your business, go and see if you can buy them. Yeah. So what was like What was that experience like actually doing that first valuation of being actually a proper agent without, I mean, it's not really, I mean, I can say it because I was a former agent, 2013 to 2003 to 1999. There's probably the same format of how you present a valuation. It's just different tools you present to the person.
Yeah.
So,
well, I remember it was a £55,000 ground floor flat, and I come away with a fee of £1,750 plus VAT, and the office couldn't believe at what percentage that converted to when I got it back. But to be honest with you, I didn't know any different, you know. So I went out. That was the minimum fee, and
but it's probably perception, because obviously auctions are probably high fees, usually higher fees, aren't they? So you just had a different view on it than the preconceived ideas of lower fees. Reminds me of the scene from Wolf on Wall Street, where he gets on the phone and sells those pink sheets, and the guy gets off the phone and goes, "How the fuck do you do that?"
So I went from there. Then I had 5 years, or just approaching 5 years, in that agency, and then from there I left, and I had a year with Purple Bricks. You know, back in the days when Purple Bricks were a big business, and then as I was getting towards the end of that first year, I had a desire to start my own agency, and I ended up speaking with a chap who ultimately became a business partner, and he is a property surveyor, and he offered to fund it. You know, 3 kids, you know, family to support. I didn't have any money behind me. So I did the hard work, and he provided the money, and Nicholson's was born, and off we went from there.
And how's that been for the last 5 years? Quite a mixture, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they say that the hardest ship to sail is a partnership.
Yeah.
So we're not in partnership anymore.
Yeah.
So that partnership came to an end about a year ago. So since then, it's been just me, and you know, all for the better, really. You know, I can make my own decisions wholly now. You know, the company's going in a direction that I want it to go, without having to speak to anyone else about costs and, you know, plans. So it's worked out really, really well.
And also, like, that direction of where you want to go, if it's not aligned both, and you're almost like 2 ships trying to sail the seas, it's never going to get to the destination.
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, I've always been quite forward thinking and really keen to adopt new technology, new methods, new marketing strategies and technology. Whereas the guy who I was in partnership with was much older than me, you know, and couldn't see what was wrong with, you know, very traditional, old-fashioned style estate agency. So there was definitely a little bit of a clash there that, you know, was always going to, or was never going to
need to be resolved at some point.
Yeah, it was going to have to be resolved at some point, and it did.
And Ash, what's quite nice actually getting you on the sofa today, and bear in mind for anyone listening and watching, you only probably found out about half an hour ago.
If that, yeah.
So what's nice actually getting you on is actually we mostly interview business owners of this agency. We rarely have actually the ability to actually speak to some of the team members on a podcast like this. So you said you've been at Nicholson a year. How long were you in the industry before Nicholson's? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I was probably 12 months with a corporate. So I'd
Yeah.
probably only been in a estate agency for 12 months prior. I get the similar background to I was motor trade as well. So I've always been sales, but yeah, just a different. Yeah.
Did you blag the interview as well with Mark into a position as well as an agent? But like the motor trade.
I went after him, actually.
Yeah. Oh, did you guys do it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Taught-
headhunted. Yeah,
taught the previous journey of the individual recruited you, and corporate. So, you know, I was pretty much similar. I worked for Connells and then went into independent, and for me there was 2 different ways of working in that, and thinking and operating, and you know, you're a cog in a machine in one place, and here you have to almost have an entrepreneurial spirit inside you to work in that, to think on your feet. How was that transition over, especially when you've got someone who's such a forward-thinking agency? How was that transition over from you from going to that corporate machine to being like your first day in Nicholson's? What was the insights you thought, wow, didn't know this even existed in industry?
Well, going to corporate and just seeing the way they did things. Obviously, they've done the same thing for ages, decades possibly. So you look at their CRM system and it's like that old Windows 95 style looking grey boxes. I was like, I can't believe they're using this in 2021. This is crazy. Then they say things like, oh, this is how you send memos out. You've got to print them off. You've then got to put them back in the scanner to create the PDF. So I was like, what? Honestly, what are we doing here? This is bonkers. It's taken me 30 minutes to send memos out. Sure, there has to be a quicker way than this.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously when Mark showed me this is what we do when we use Lifecycle, I was like, this makes more sense. But just trying to incorporate change into a corporate, like you say, I'm just a very tiny cog at the very bottom of the pile. So coming into a more independent, if I've got this, could we potentially try this? I've only got Mark to speak to see if that's a good idea or not.
And especially because you've been a part of some of our business accelerator programs over the last year, which has been great for as a leader to bring you along, because you don't necessarily have that access to that. It tends to be, especially when you're in a corporate machine, they do that stuff there and we just get told what to do at the bottom.
Yeah.
And what's it been like what have you learnt maybe over the last year that you've learnt the most out of working? Because bearing in mind, as an independent goes, obviously I work with a lot of independents over the UK, and dealing with Mark and how you think and how you operate and what you think is maybe a different type of independent to maybe a traditional independent that is like halfway between Mark and halfway between a corporate. And I've been independent for 20, 30 years, but I'm going to keep it this way. I don't want to break anything. And I've learned all my stuff from the corporate days. So what have you learned in the last year, you'd probably say the most, and maybe the year you did at a corporate?
Probably what I've learned most is potentially communication with clients is very much key. Obviously, you get told that with corporate, but there's no technologies where you can keep in touch with them. It is just on the phone, and you've only got 8 hours a day to try and talk to all your vendors, all your buyers. So yeah, different ways of communicating with vendors certainly, and buyers as well. It's just easier ways to keep in touch with them. Yeah.
And over sort of the last year, you've been involved in obviously some of our programs. And prior to that, obviously you had probably 4 years of running a business, Mark. So you've had that partnership split, and really sort of the idea of this whole podcast we have is what we call like Mark's methodology. We built up the estate agency business journey, and we looked at 5 stages of a business. And startup, it tends to really be that concept idea probably in like 2019, before you started Nicholsons, when you're at Purple Bricks thinking, I should start doing this myself. And then it goes into that next stage, which obviously you did, turning that first key into saying, right, I'm going to be doing this as my own business. For listeners out there who might be in that first year or 2 years, and you're pretty much like the next stage beyond them, like what's been your biggest learnings, maybe outside of just the partnership splitting, that you have learned running a business or operating a business, employing staff, staff leaving, trying a new system?
Well, I think it's incredibly difficult running a business. I think a lot of people have a dream of running a business. It's all going to be sunshine and roses and it's going to be great. But actually, it's really difficult. Staff is, one of the biggest problems, I think. And in the past, certainly, staff has been a difficult one for me. But I think as well as that, getting the right processes in place within the business and getting everyone to be able to understand and adhere to those processes is always difficult. At the start, everyone's doing everything, and you can't concentrate on one particular thing. And I think the sooner that you can get to putting everyone in their own lane, doing their own job, and understanding exactly what their job is and what their responsibilities are and aren't, the better. As you mentioned, we've been through we're going through the business development program this year, which has been really helpful in trying to put those processes in place. And we've got a long way to go yet. We're not there. It's probably going to be, the middle of next year before we've taken all of the learnings from the course and actually managed to implement it. But, we've already changed quite a lot in the business, and it's changing. So, yeah, we're a bit further down the line. I think if you look at the different stages, we're definitely operational. We've dipped our toe into pressure cooker, got it burnt and pulled it back out again. But I think it's important to get all of those systems, processes, people, the core values in place before we attempt to try and pass through that fourth stage again.
And processes, for anyone listening out there might be thinking, okay, what does process mean? Like if you could break that down in a more estate agency way, well, what would you come back from a workshop and they've talked about processes, and someone says you need to get process in your business, and you think, okay, yeah, processes, but like I still don't know what do you mean a process. Like what would be a simple process you'd probably say that you've implemented or developed out?
I think it's everything. It's everything from having consistency even in the way that you answer the phone. How you book a viewing, how you book a market appraisal, what you do and you don't say. It's everything. And we're now starting to work on getting all of those processes down on paper and implemented so that, it's the same consistent service regardless of who you deal with in the business, and everyone knows what's next. Nothing gets missed. And the whole thing works like a machine, like clockwork. But yeah, I think it's everything that you do in your business should have a right way of doing it, the way of doing it.
Nicholson's way, which we learnt in the previous session, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
And another one you touched on there about core values. And I wanted to bring this in because I noticed when we did the Mike Symes brand workbook that you had yours was really, really good. You shared it within our group with one of our refocus sessions, and I pulled it in and everyone was like, wow, this is really good. And people have brand guidelines, but you just took that to another level and obviously then developed a lot of the core values on it. And most people say I've got core values, but what have you learned in having core values and actually implementing core values? Like what's the difference in, I've got it on a wall, it looks really good, so I can say I've got my core values, but someone's to ask me or someone's asked a team member, they wouldn't have no clue what that means, just whatever that is up there, I've copied it from someone else, to actually go in, this is like the lifeblood of how we operate.
I think for us, certainly the core values, since they've been implemented, have really helped to deal with the issues that you come across with people. I've always had difficulty having awkward conversations with people. I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to feel like I've let anyone down. And generally don't want to get into a confrontational situation. Since we've had the core values in place, we've turned over staff, but what we've managed to do is get rid of the staff that really don't align themselves with the core values. In the last sort of 6 or 7 months, there's been 2 members of staff which clearly weren't aligned with our core values. And, because of that, they had to go the separate ways. They couldn't continue on the journey with us. And, they were really nice people, which was a shame. But unfortunately, they just didn't have, the commitment that we expect. And
that's a good point, because common people go, they're nice and they're a nice person. And it's like, that's not enough to say whether they're suited for the role or the same drive of the like you said, the ship. I want to move the ship in this right direction. Have they got the core values to align with where I need to go? They could be nice people, but it's not they're bad people if they don't match the core values. It's just they're not in the right place.
No, that's right.
Or on the right ship. And I remember Mark's obviously off camera in the same studio. I remember having the same conversation with Mark when I was back in agency, and he told me about core values. I started to implement it, and within a year, like within a 6-month period, we had lost half of the team. But I knew he'd told me that, expect this is what's going to happen, because you're going to replace him with the people who actually match the core values, that actually you start to see the synergy work in the office. And like for you, Ash, what have you found working in a company like that has got that at the forefront, especially if you've gone to you're a cog in a machine that basically just gives all the mission and what we're doing, but ultimately it's just to make a load of money for its shareholders. What have you found working within a company that's got core values in place and has all that sort of processes in place compared to maybe any of the other industries you've worked in?
Yeah, it's just nice to know that we're all on the same path, with core values. It's, like I say, in our office, they're printed on the wall. So it's, if it is just something like just take ownership of a mistake you've made, it's just take ownership, just do it.
And it's not Mark's opinion versus your opinion. It's like it removes the emotion out of it, and actually it's on. And the last year, obviously, going to some of our programs and being involved with that. What we had a previous podcast, and they were saying actually what was nice is actually they're recruiting the next generation of their children to take over and run the business. And they said actually one of their sons never went off to university. He never really did that. So to him, have a new style of learning has actually developed them and not just them being in the business. So what have you found maybe in the last year that Mark was talking about systems and processes and core values? Is there anything particularly you thought was of value in the last year you've learned doing a part of our sort of program?
Yeah, so essentially things like I've just said about just taking ownership of what you've done. Don't mask anything. Don't tell the clients anything that isn't true or anything like that, because normally you do want to protect yourself as an agent or protect your brand. But yeah, it's just take ownership of anything that's happened. Yeah.
And going forward now, so you've got 5 years. You've gone through quite a few things: COVID, closing of the market, a massive change in the market, partnership change. Even in that first 5 years, the last year trying to implement another version of yourself. So what's your plans for going forward in the next 5-year plan? Which I know I can ask because one of our programs was around that. So like, where do you want to go, and what's your sort of vision for?
Well, this last year has allowed us to bring in a fair bit of changes, which is now setting the scene for the way forward. So we've changed fundamentally the service that we offer to our clients. So we have add a lot more value to them now. We've implemented a method which we call secure sale, which is helping us to make our sales more reliable, make the conveyancing process much smoother and much quicker, and just to make the whole experience of buying and selling a property more enjoyable. What that's allowed us to do is increase our fees quite considerably and stand on them, which is now allowing us to charge the sort of fees that we want to. And that's, totally changing the cash flow situation in the business and the prospects. And what we're also finding is in doing that and the way that we market homes, we're getting more of the right type of properties, or the properties that really kind of fit within our business, which is sort of the middle to the upper end of the market, where they're much nicer property, much higher values, and also much higher fees as well. So I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see further movement towards that. I think we're going to establish ourselves in that middle to upper end of the market, and the agent to go to if you want a really good experience that's low stress. Then Nicholsons will be the one to choose in the area.
And I'll be honest with you, like I follow you, and you probably see some of the likes I always give you on your videos. A lot of clients are doing now, and even some of the video tours you present, I even show, Kel, look at this house. So my partner, so she's like, oh, can we move up that way? I was like, no, it's too cold up there. We'll stay down south. So yeah, definitely, I've seen that transition over in there's just fine tuning things that you've done in operating, even your brand and how you've sort of moved a little, just sharpness really, than having to rip it up and start all over again, or completely think you need to change yourself every month. And sort of technology wise, what have you, without, obviously we're a technology company, we've got EAX involved at Iceberg. What sort of things have you felt that's been useful for you technology wise that you've used in it, or you're finding useful to streamline your business or whatever that might be?
Yeah. And I think the word there is probably like useful to streamline the business. Life cycle, going out and finding viewing feedback is really useful for us. also the element in the system called ROCs, which allows us to see when people have been active that we've been out and delivered market appraisals to, or people that are looking to buy a property that have been actively looking on our website at specific properties. That is useful in streamlining the calls that we're making and making that side of things more efficient. As Ash mentioned, it blew his mind when he saw how easy it was to issue a memorandum of sale after
and that's crazy.
Couple of clicks.
Because we had the conversation, and I've spoken to on a previous podcast, and actually, if anyone's listening, you were the person we had a conversation about the hotbox and them still using that paper format and 25 cards, 30 people. See you later. I don't want any more. And obviously, then coming into it where you've got a ROCs, which is like, don't worry about it. It's like you've got 10,000 contacts. Here's 4 people who just speak to them today because they've been active. It's just a whole different way of thinking and working, really.
Yeah, we had an incentive where I used to work where if you've made 100 calls a day, you got a £5 gift card. But I won that £5 gift card, but I'd booked no MAs.
Yeah.
So, but they were just more ecstatic that I'd made 100 calls in a day.
5p a call.
Yeah, that's it. But with
crazy,
with ROCs, I can make 10 or 15 calls and probably book a good handful of MAs.
Yeah.
So it's just having. Well, if you're ringing 100 people a day, they're probably cold. They're probably stone dead cold leads. Well, at least with ROCs, they're either red hot or lukewarm.
Yeah, people that are receptible to a phone call. And I think that's what 100 phone calls a day to someone is just a demoralising job, because half the time, if there's no sequence after, no nurture process afterwards, or conversation or marketing to those people, they're like, who are you? Where are you from? Oh, yeah, about 4 years ago, I think you did something with us. I'm not too sure. Okay, great. You want to move? No. Okay, see you later. Bye. And then you put your phone down, and that was the call, isn't it?
Exactly that. But a prime example, I got one. They'd read a blog about, I think it was something to do about what can an outbuilding in your garden do to the value of your property. I'd seen the chap had read that 4 times, so I rang him because he's clearly interested about the price of his house. He was actually on the market with a competitor. So we managed to go out and see them. We're still actually negotiating them coming on the market with us, but they've disinstructed the agent that they was on with. So we're nearly there. Yeah. We're nearly getting them on.
But you would have never seen that in that process. It would just been a case of trying to door knock that process and hope for the best. So it's a really good story. And anything else, like technology wise, anything else you feel like, okay, the last 5 years, because you're quite fresh, some people have got older processes and stuff in place that might have just kept it there because that's doing its thing. Like, have you found, do you communicate? How do you communicate with people? Is it through WhatsApp? Are you doing text messages? Are you doing emails?
Yeah, primarily WhatsApp. Yeah, WhatsApp groups. It's nice. The clients like it. It's easy for them to drop a message in if they want an update on something or if they've got any questions, and it allows us to quickly communicate with them as well. Sometimes when you making telephone calls, you can end up what should have been a 2-minute call can turn into a 15-minute call, whereas it can be a bit more efficient to send a message through WhatsApp. But yeah, clients generally love that, the communication side of things, and things like WhatsApp, which I'm sure the corporate that you came from, I haven't even thought about using yet. No. Can be really, really useful.
And so going forward, you said about you're going to move more and more into the upper market. And previously, before, you worked for Purple Bricks, and obviously that's pretty much slowly dying off into death.
Slowly,
yeah. Where do you see the market move in regards to traditional agency practices in a modern way, streamlining processes, and then the rise of that sort of self-employed model? Because you've experienced both, haven't you? Yeah. So you've got quite a good insight into that part than just going, I just need to do, it's either one or the other. Where do you see that going in the future in regards to independents and corporates and self-employed and hub models, whatever? Where do you think the survival is at on that?
I think the low cost fixed fee agents will ultimately die. With the way that the costs are and the way that they continue to rise, that business model just isn't sustainable. Obviously, there's been a big rise in self-employed estate agents over the last few years, but I think it's quite a it's quite a tough one, that, because for a lot of people, that are your average estate agent working in a corporate or a high street agency, if they want to go on their own, they need to be able to support themselves for comfortably 6 to 9 months on their own finances before the pipeline starts to cash in. And I know certainly for me, I wouldn't have been able to do that without having the backing of a business partner. I wouldn't have been brave enough to perhaps release equity from the house and, take risks that way to do it. But at the same time, I'm sure I'd have made a really good self-employed estate agent. But, I think because of that, it does limit the amount of people that can move into that space. So, I'm not sure that that's perfect, really. For me, we had a look at a self-employed model, but, I think that actually people being employed but getting a good share of the commission and a salary and, that support is, for me anyway, it's a better idea. It would have worked better for me, and I suppose I resonate more with what would have worked better for me. But yeah, the world's definitely changing.
Going back to what you're saying though, but your outcome of your agency is different to maybe the sort of outcome you're trying to achieve, and the output you get to the outcome is different to working in those traditional agencies where you're told to make 100 phone calls a day, and that's your time spent. Whereas actually you don't have to do that. You can make these handful of phone calls in 10 minutes, then speak to this person, then have a conversation with that one, then pick up the phone to that one. And then so like the cost per person to operate your business in its model is going to be a lot more cheaper to enable, not necessarily cheaper, but enable then more money to be spread around the people in the business than having 50 people doing the same jobs. That's
demoralizing.
And you could have 10 people doing exactly the same thing, and those 10 people could earn more money than the 50 people distributed out.
It definitely allows you to be more efficient. But you still need the people to be able to provide the 100%. Service. But it definitely does allow you to be more efficient.
I got last bit of advice I want to get from both of you, for anyone listening out there. So it's good to have both of you on here. What would you say is one bit of advice you'd give to someone who's listened to this podcast, who is 1 year into their business?
Okay.
And looking forward.
I think if they're 1 year into the business, they're probably looking at if they haven't already put in people around them. And for me, as much as anything, it's about finding the right people that have got similar values and a similar outlook on life to you. If you've got the right people around you, that can help you to grow the business and scale much better than it can if you've got people around you that you're clashing with and it's not working with. So definitely, starting to employ the right sort of people. But in order to do that, you kind of need to understand the core values element of it. So I think if I'd have, if there was a business development program 3 or 4 years ago, and I think if I'd have gone on it back then, would have been, the business would have been a lot further down the line today than it is at the moment. So I think, getting as a minimum a good mentor that's maybe gone down that road before and can give you some guidance on, how to put the systems and processes and the people in place to allow you to then grow the business from a really solid base. Will be my advice. Professional footballers need coaches, don't they?
I think everyone is, yeah.
Why don't professional estate agents have mentors and coaches? We need them as well.
I think coaches need coaches as well.
Of course they do. Yeah, everyone needs a coach.
And I think actually some of the most successful people I've had out there actually have multiple coaches for different reasons. This one is really good at this one's really good at that one, and that enables them to grow and develop. But you're right in what you're saying about, first you probably need to understand the core, who we are, or who am I, and then who do I then try to find the attractor in those people. And for you, Ash, like for someone maybe listening out there who is in the industry right now, who might be in a more senior role or in a position where they have an employer who might give a little bit more flexibility to sort of supporting them, is there any bit of advice you'd give out them what you probably maybe learned over the last year?
Yeah, any advice I give is just, if you're stuck in a corporate and you see an independent that you want to work with, that was exactly my thing. I saw what Mark was doing, wanted to join. Just enjoy growing the business as an employee. I know I'm not I'm not a majority shareholder or anything like that. I'm just an employee, but just to enjoy the business development from my position is really, I'll take great pleasure in it. So. Just enjoy growing a business with a partner. Yeah,
it's invested in the partnership, isn't it? Really, of anything. It doesn't have to have the name above the door, but
exactly that.
It.
Yeah,
no, that's important, isn't it? If we grow together, we've all still got jobs, haven't we? Yeah. at the end of the day, if it doesn't go in the right direction, none of us want to be out there looking for jobs, do we? So
back in a corporate world as well. No one wants to be selling cars either. No. So
no, don't want to sell cars. Don't want to go back to that hot box either.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate you guys coming on today. Really good.
Rob.
Thank you very much for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this Estate Agency X podcast. Can you make sure that you're actually subscribed to this podcast channel if you liked the content? It helps us massively to get better guests, and it just helps us generally. So you might think you're subscribed, but just have a double check, whatever your podcast platform of preference is, that you're actually subscribed, and then that way we can continue to grow the channel and get better and better guests for you.